Hi, welcome back to Life is a Treasure podcast. I'm your hostess, Michelle Durand, and this is episode number 7. Today, I'm going to be joined with a beautiful guest. Her name is Jo Ridley, and she is the founder of The Body Talks. Jo supports socially and environmentally aware people to recover or avoid burnout, so increasing their impact in the world. Jo helps people to slow down, reconnect to their body wisdom, and live more harmoniously with themselves and nature. She helps those who desire to feel full of energy, strong, relaxed, and healthy in their body. Jo is an educator and facilitator with over a decade's worth of experience guiding groups all over the world, including Scotland, Africa, and South America, and creating programs as the education manager at a center of transformation. She has experienced varying degrees of illness throughout her whole life, and then in her early 30s, she ended up experiencing chronic fatigue syndrome for an entire year. She has a quote that I just love, and this pretty much sums up our conversation as well. It says, "I decided to start listening to my body instead of seeing it as a problem that needed to be fixed." Our conversation is so rich and full of great information, and Jo is full of wisdom. I know that you're going to enjoy it. So get comfy and let's get started, shall we? Hi, Jo. So good to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle.
Jo Ridley has a website called thebodytalks.online. And I visited your website, I watched your YouTube channel, and I love everything you're doing. I'm so excited to have you here. I would like to start off by just having you share with us like a little bit about yourself and where you live and the creation of your website.
Thank you so much. So I started The Body Talks around a year ago, and it's really a project all about how we can live more deliberately and create health from the inside out. And I created this because I got very ill and moved through that. And I'm now the healthiest I've ever been. And I just love sharing this stuff with people. And at the moment, I live on the Isle of Wight, which is a small island off the south coast of England. Very beautiful and very happy here.
Beautiful. So when you mentioned you had an illness, would you like to share a little bit about that? Like, when did you first become ill and what was involved in that?
So the story of with me and health actually is a long story. So I was always quite an unwell child, and I used to get ill quite frequently. It was always just something that happened, and I, on many levels, just felt that there was something maybe wrong with me, or that I had a more vulnerable body, that I was more likely to get ill. Like, these were some of the beliefs that I had. And this all kind of culminated to around 2.5 years ago now, where I started to get infections in my body, and it was 7 in total, like kidney infection, chest infection, which lasted months and months. And I just didn't get any better, and it then turned into post-viral fatigue and then chronic fatigue, and I was bedridden for around 4 months in the end. So yeah,
wow.
And wow. I don't know if you want me to share my kind of like defining moment in a way, like when everything kind of started to change for me. But,
yeah. So when you were in bed rest, were you on a lot of medications at that time for your illnesses?
Well, interestingly, chronic fatigue syndrome, the only things that they actually prescribe you are like painkillers, or that's it really. There's not a lot of support or kind of general understanding. I think I was very lucky. I had a doctor who knew immediately what was happening for me. But even though he knew, there really isn't a lot that they offer. They kind of offer things around diet and really recommend rest, painkillers if the pain's too much. But other than that you're kind of left to your own devices, really.
Did they have any idea, or did you have any idea of why or how you came up with chronic fatigue syndrome?
So for me, what I think it was a kind of it was so many things, and what I realize now is that I needed to reinvent myself completely. Like, I'm not the person I was before I got ill. And, you know, I mean, I totally believe that chronic fatigue, post-viral fatigue are definitely stress-related illnesses. I was definitely working too hard. I've got like definitely, you know, high stress levels, very heightened nervous system. And I think that's one of the main contributing factors. And then when I started to get curious, I was like, well, why? Why am I in this like prolonged stress response? So there's lots and lots of different reasons why I was in that prolonged stress response. And yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is that I don't believe I am the person that I was before I got ill. Like, I believe I'm a well person now, which has been huge for me. So not only have I reduced the stress in my life, I've also reinvented who I think I am and what I believe about my body, what I believe is possible for myself in the area of health. So a tremendous amount of things has changed since I got better.
So do you feel like you having that illness and caused you to reevaluate your life, reevaluate who you were, and want to make a change and want to make a difference?
100%.
Wow.
Yeah, for me, the now in reflection, I feel that in many ways me getting that ill was quite inevitable, based around what I believed about myself, about my body, what I believed, and also the amount of stress that I was allowing in my life. So I was going in a certain direction and I was behaving in certain ways, for example, not really meeting my needs or not really having clear boundaries at work. And there are so, you know, and what's changed now is that I do have clear boundaries and I do communicate my needs, and I do really try like every day I have a morning practice which is about, you know, lowering, calming the nervous system and getting back into my body and listening again to what my body's telling me, because like I mentioned earlier, for so long I really believed there was something wrong with my body. I felt it was vulnerable, and now I 100% believe that actually it's self-regulating, self-healing, that if I can tap into my intuition and my body intelligence, I know what I need. I know what I need to stay well, moment to moment and day to day, actually. And for me now, I create health daily. It's not like a kind of, and I do that by listening to what my needs are. And
so when you were really sick, what were the stories that you were telling yourself when you were ill?
Yeah, so I think I'd like to maybe just share a kind of one of my defining moments, actually, which is, you know, I felt so much shame. You know, I couldn't believe that I had, you know, I was 35, I was back home because I was so unwell. I was bedridden. And I remember it so clearly now. It's really interesting remembering it. You know, I'm lying in bed and I've got heart palpitations, exhaustion, dizziness, headaches, body aches, you know, really foggy mind, everything. And really a lot of it was shame around not, you know, how could I let this happen? Like, how has this happened to me?
Did you blame yourself?
On part of it, I felt that it was happening to me, that there was something wrong with me, with my body. And partly I felt that I blamed myself for it. And then in that moment, actually, that's when things shifted. And I realized that it was actually after a really vulnerable conversation with a friend. And I was like, wow, I just suddenly realized that I couldn't be the person that I was before I got ill if I wanted to be well. And, you know, this happened, it slowly happened over time. But in that moment, there was a very clear feeling of like, wow, I need to take responsibility now. And I need to make really big changes and I need to be different. And actually, that's when things really started to change for me. It was like, sometimes you have to kind of hit that rock bottom and that situation where things just feel like they've all fallen apart and it's all terrible. But something happens and it's like, okay, and now, like I've already mentioned, that actually what happened to me I see it as one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it gave me an opportunity to entirely reinvent myself and my life to support my health.
Okay.
And which I now do, and it's very exciting.
Okay, so you've had a journey to healing.
Yeah.
Right? And so do you feel like that journey to healing was self-led?
I think so much of it I couldn't have done this alone. Okay. There's no way. Sorry about the noise. Should we just carry on?
Oh no.
There's no way that I could have done this alone. I think, but equally it's like I got really clear on why I was doing it, and I took responsibility and I was motivated. So I feel that's like the fire behind all of the momentum. It's like, unless we make that strong choice and decision, it's like, actually I'm taking control now and I'm gonna sort of take the wheel of my life in a way. All the support in the world probably won't be that helpful. It's like, so yes, I think it was both, and also having mentors and people that were further ahead of me throughout that process. You could go, I remember that. Like, I remember being in that place. Do this, and you'll break through to that next level. And it's like, that was huge. But I needed to have the, the motivation and passion to like keep going, the will to live, really fully live.
Ooh, that is so, I love that you said that, the will to live, because when we are at our lowest point, when we are just living in pain and our life just feels like it's just, I used to feel like someone took my purse and just dumped it upside down and everything's just all over the ground. That's how my life felt at my lowest point. And I didn't know how to get out. I didn't know even who to reach out to. But then when you realize and you start seeing that there are people who can help, that have already been through this and they're ahead, and then they can help guide and lead us out of that maze of life that sometimes we find ourselves in, where it's just dark and scary. We feel alone. We feel like something's wrong with us and everybody else is living their life and they forget about us, and we feel that. And when we feel that, we start to isolate ourselves and we can feel so hopeless. And then that despair sets in and we don't have a will to live anymore. And, then we have to find a way to find the strength to make that decision that I do want to live. I don't want to live like this, so I need to make changes. And that has to come from within, because you, as well as I know, that we can help women and we can lead them and coach them in the way that they should go. But if they're not willing to do that, they want us to do that for them, it doesn't work. They have to be willing to do it, and they have to find that energy that they have within themselves to say to themselves, we will do this. And is that how you felt, that you had to find it within yourself and go really deep inside? And sometimes that's why we're put in those situations when we have no one around us and nothing left except ourselves. And we realize that, okay, no one else is going to take care of me. I better learn how to take care of myself. Well, who am I and what do I need? And did you feel that way?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I think you described that beautifully. And one thing I want to say to the people that are listening, if you're experiencing really ill health, one of the most powerful things you can do is get clear on why you want to get better. Because one thing I've noticed often is that when we go, okay, like why do I want to get better? We realize, and you may want to just take a moment now just to think about it. A lot of our whys are actually other people's. They're like, there's responsibilities and there's things that come in and that tell you why you should get out of bed and why you should do this and why you should do that. But the most powerful thing that we can do as individuals, and if we really want to create true health, is to choose our own whys. Like, do it for you, because that's the fuel that will get you up and motivate you. Like for me, for example, one of my biggest whys is because I want to feel alive and healthy in this body. I want to feel great in this body. It's like, that's not someone else's why. I haven't been given that as like some responsibility.
Yeah.
And do you know what? Because it feels so good. Because it feels so good to be healthy and well in this body. And because it allows me to go out on adventures, and it allows me to go walking and go and be by the ocean, all of these things. So yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think we just have to remember that we've been given a lot of the reasons why we should do certain things by other people, by our society, by our families, teachers, bosses, everything. But when we start to claim them for ourselves, that's when things can get, I think, really exciting.
I love that you just said that, because our bodies are our vessel. Our bodies are our vehicle to help us experience the world. You know, we're here and we have a life because we're breathing and we have air and oxygen. But if we are confined to the bed or the sofa because of depression or pain or illness, those things prevent us from living life, from enjoying life. You know, we don't see life as a treasure. We see life as a burden. And I really want us to explain and show how a shift can happen for not just you and not just me, but for anybody. Anyone can have a shift. And let's talk about how the why is so important. And I believe that's like mentally, if we can figure out why we want to get well, like you shared, to explore the world. Maybe we have little children or grandchildren and we want to play with them. Maybe we have a dog. We want to take them for a walk. I mean, there are so many things around us to be grateful for and to appreciate, but we just can't sometimes when we're at our lowest point. Yeah. So how can someone who's really at their lowest point find that strength inside of them and their why and their desire to live, to make that shift, to come out of the darkness and to see some light and to see another vision that looks better than the reality that they're in right now?
That's a brilliant question. And one of the things that I did very often, so when I was bedbound, I used to visualize myself well. And this is a time when I, all I could sometimes manage was like a very short walk to the shower or maybe down into the garden. Like, that might have been about as much as I could manage.
Yeah.
But what I did do was I started to visualize myself well. And I started to I would lie in bed and I had a guided visualization for this actually. But you don't need one. So it's really just like imagining a version of you that is really well and healthy and at ease, and just, what does she look like? What does she do in the morning? Like, how does she get up and start her day? And I would imagine her, and this is from my bed, bear in mind, but I would imagine this other version of me was in this like really beautiful house by the ocean, and she would get up, she would jump out of bed. And she would jump on her bike and she would cycle down to the ocean. She would jump into the ocean. And then when she came out of the ocean, and this is all in visualization, I would merge with her. I would merge with that part of that vision of her. And I could, just for a while, I would feel it. I just feel it in my body. I'd be like, oh, it was kind of nice. It was like I kind of felt a bit like what it would be like to be her. So I think one of the, and just to be clear here, like visualization, we all visualize very differently. So some of us say we can't visualize, but I would we do all in fact visualize, but just in different ways. So if you imagine we can do this just now, actually, it's quite a fun thing to imagine, is because it's just our imagination, right? So if you imagine that you've got a lemon and you cut it a little bit off a lemon, and you're and imagine picking it up in your hand and then squeezing it into your mouth, and I get an instant reaction. So some of you may see the lemon. Some of you may feel it, and some of you may just get a sense of it. But in some way, you can imagine that lemon, and that's all visualization is. So it's not, and however you perceive it in your mind is perfect. There is no right or wrong way to visualize. Okay. But so that was one of the things that I used to motivate me. It was like, hey, that's where I'm going. Like, that is where I was going, and I was very determined. I think I'm quite a determined person anyway, but I was like, this isn't my life. I'm not going to be in bed. I suppose part of me knew that, but I definitely use visualization as a tool to keep motivated and keep going.
When you do visualization, do you feel like you're using all of your senses?
I sometimes not. It depends, I think, and it's when we start playing with it, I think it's really important to like whatever you experience is perfect. You may really get very little. And when you start, you might just be like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, this doesn't make any sense. I'm not feeling anything. I'm not experiencing anything. And sometimes I do it and I wouldn't feel much. I maybe get a vague idea of this person that I wanted to be. And other times, absolutely, I could feel it. I was there. So yeah, there's like varying degrees, I think. And sometimes, like I say, I would imagine her coming out of the sea, and then I would merge that. And sometimes I really felt that, like really felt it in my cells. Yeah.
Okay. So I like that we're getting this message across. There's no right or wrong way.
Oh yeah.
If we can take the judgment off, because I remember the first time I was exposed to these, visualization, meditation, yoga, I didn't know what they were. And because you don't know, the unknown makes you feel like, oh, it's weird or it's strange. I don't know how to do this. And it actually prevents people from doing it. And over the last few, the years and the work that I've been doing, I realized that meditation is just being still and just being in present. And visualization is just letting your mind go where it wants to go and tapping into your higher self, the best you that you can be, and your source that gives you life and that gives you energy. And tapping into that and being able to feel and maybe sometimes hear or to be aware of the signs around us in nature that are calling us to become well, to become whole, to become healthy, because we're put on this earth not to be ill and sickly and struggling and suffering all the time. Do we have to go through those things? Absolutely. We all have to go through struggles and hardships, and they make us stronger and wiser, and we learn so much, and then we can use that and help other people. That's why we're here, to help other people, not just for ourselves, but we have to take care of ourselves before we can help other people. I'm wondering if you are a people pleaser, like myself. I was a people pleaser. I did not have boundaries for myself. So I allowed everyone to dictate who I was, what I was going to do, where I was going to do everything. And everything was dictated by the external world. And there's so many people that you will go literally crazy. And you have to learn how to tap into yourself and listen to yourself, listen to your intuition, listen to your inner wisdom to know what you need. And then when you knew what you needed to become whole again, and you were visualizing yourself feeling healthy and whole, did that give you the energy that you needed to get up and start making changes? And what was that first change that you made? What was that first decision that I'm going to change all of this? Where did that shift happen from being down, depressed, dark on the sofa to where you are now? What was that first step?
The thing that's coming to mind at the moment is it was a shift in my beliefs. I think it went from, and this was actually after a very amazing coaching call, I have to say, like it was really incredible. And she made me realize two things. She was like, there is nothing wrong with me to begin with. Yes, actually, my symptoms were absolutely a result of the stress response, which was happening and being stimulated for reasons that you mentioned just there, that I wasn't meeting my needs, I didn't have clear boundaries. Mm-hmm. So rather than seeing myself as someone who's unwell and there's something going wrong with me, actually I just suddenly started seeing it as like perfect. I was like, wow, this is like a protective mechanism. This is the way that my body is protecting me from overworking, not having my needs met, not having clear boundaries. And the other big shift, so it was around how my body, like seeing that actually what was happening to me wasn't wrong. And also along with my emotions, like seeing them as a guidance, part of this guidance system. Mm-hmm. And that was another big shift. It was like, starting to really trust myself. rather than being like all this stuff randomly happening to me. I was like, it's happening for a reason, and really starting to like trust that I could. Do you know what? I'm just realizing what the biggest thing for me was. It was like realizing that I could trust myself to create health. That if I really followed what felt right, what felt nourishing, what felt good, that would automatically lead me to a better life, rather than going, okay, I'll do that for you, I'll do that for you, I'll do this, and like putting myself in like a million different places and not listening to myself. And I think that was one of the biggest shifts. It was like, okay, I can trust myself, I can trust my body, and I can trust that life is on my side as well, because I can, like, using my intuitive senses and like following that kind of actually trusting that I can follow what feels good and what feels right for me. And that does lead to health, connection, love, all the good stuff.
Do you find that when you're trying to make that decision and that choice to listen to yourself and to trust yourself, do you find that we are like conditioned to listen to what everybody else tells us that we should do? We should do. And, you know, like, well, you should do this and you should do that. Even if you don't ask, you're just always filled with should-haves. You should do this, you should do that. No one really knows what we need except ourselves. But when we've made decisions that have led us to places that are hard and difficult, for myself personally, I didn't trust myself, because the decisions that I had made in the past led me to some really dark, difficult times. So I found myself struggling with trusting myself again. And so have you experienced that? And what did you do to practice to build that muscle of trusting yourself again, that you're going to make the right decision and not the wrong ones again?
Yeah, brilliant question. And I think it requires a lot of, you know, patience, and also giving ourselves like 1,000 second chances, because we're going to get it wrong loads. I got it wrong loads. But it's like, you know, realizing that when, you know, I think we can all remember times when we've ignored that like gut feeling. Like, let's just think about it now, actually, because I think we all can relate to that. Like something really has been like, no, don't do it, it doesn't feel right. We do it, what happens?
Okay.
Usually it's a bit disastrous. And then on the other side of that, what happens when we get that excited feeling in our belly and we're like, woo, you know, this feels really good. And not in a kind of self-indulgent way, but in a nourishing, like, this is good for me way. And it works out, you know, these things work out. So I would say, and also along that way, like, it takes time to experiment and get it wrong, like, and then pick ourselves up from that and not be hard on ourselves, or be hard on ourselves, but like recognize that it's all part of a process of just learning to trust ourselves, and learning that if we can do what we can trust what we feel is right for our lives. We are the expert of our lives, and that is the truth. But yes, I also want to speak to something else that you mentioned, which is that, yes, absolutely, we're totally conditioned out of that. We have to recognize that we are taught to, from a very, very young age, not trust ourselves, to externalize our power into all various, you know, authority figures, men, women, other parents, bosses, everything. So we externalize that power into other people, but so to bring it back into us and be like, actually, I know what's right for me, I know what I need. It takes time. It does. It just takes time, and requires a lot of, like I say, forgiveness. Lots of second chances.
Lots of self-compassion.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of self-compassion is required for us to get to where we want to go. Because we're going to keep failing, and we're just going to get stronger as we get up and do it again. But we will still fall. We'll still struggle. But the goal is to get up quicker.
Yeah.
And to get on the right track faster. And so I love what you said. I love just the whole idea of being patient with ourselves, giving ourselves compassion, forgiving ourselves when we don't do what the right thing. You know, we're still going to mess up. We're still going to make the wrong decision. Mm-hmm. But to realize quicker that, okay, that wasn't the best for me, but what is the best for me? Or how can I get out of this now to make a better decision, or to get back on track? And I feel like as we practice these things, we can learn a lot quicker through our trials and our lessons.
Absolutely. And it's really important to remember what happens in the brain. So when you look at like you look at the neuroscience of change, when you're trying to change something which has been ingrained since a very small child, like we've been told to ignore ourselves, right? So there's a very strong pathway to kind of to ask for other people, to look to other people for what should I do next? What should I do next? So when we're starting to create a new pathway in the brain, it takes time. Like it takes time. Yeah. And so of course we're gonna make mistakes. But yeah.
And so our bodies talk to us. Do you believe that our bodies talk to us?
It's kind of gone beyond belief for me now. I experience and know that our bodies absolutely communicate through sensation, emotion, symptoms. Yeah, that's what I have now begun to see and experience daily, actually.
So it's interesting. You mentioned earlier about your body's going to let you know what it needs, including food. And I really want to talk on that for a second, because I really believe that so many of us, because of society, because of the things we were growing up seeing, social media, these, you know, we have images in our mind that we think we're supposed to look like. That's our goal, is to look like Barbie doll. Like, those are so unrealistic, and they're so harmful. And they can be so detrimental to our health. It caused me to have so many eating disorders. I restricted myself. I punished myself, or I overindulged. So I had to find that balance. But I want to talk about that. Like, do you feel like our bodies let us know what foods, even when it comes down to the food, like what we would do best eating? How it responds to certain foods. Do you believe that's all part of it as well? Nutrition choices?
I think with nutrition, and it's really important to remember that our gut health is so integral to our health. Like I think, yes, we can tune into what's right for us. Like, and that actually there's so much I could touch on. I'll start from what you mentioned, which is, I think, you know, we have different, like there are different human hungers. So we have to recognize that, yes, there is like that kind of, if we really tuned in, we can be like, okay, I think we can, and prioritizing the nutritional content of food, then yes, we probably can like think about what's right for us. And it's really important to like feed the body and brain with really good nutrition. It's just really great. And we also have hungers, emotional hungers, like we can attach emotion to food. So we may not be hungry, we may just want to kind of dull something down. And sometimes we're just thirsty. So we have to become really aware of like what's going on. Like when we're hungry, like, are we actually hungry? What is, and just start to get really conscious and deliberate about it.
And how do you do that?
For me, I slow down.
Okay. So just good.
Slow down a bit and do my research. You know, like what is good? What do our bodies need? I also, you know, I do use supplement companies. I use things that I've researched that I'm like, yeah, I know this is good for me, so I can count on that, and I'm going to eat that regularly. And also when I'm hungry, I do check in. I'm like, am I hungry? Is there something emotional happening here? Maybe I'm just thirsty. Yeah. Like, what's going on? Am I trying to avoid feeling something by eating right now? And we do
cover some.
Am I trying to cover something up? And if I get that sense, I'll do my best. Again, I'm not perfect, but I'll do my best to take some time out and feel that, rather than like put a load, eat a load of food to cover it up. But I think, nowadays there are amazing, with food, we don't need to figure it all out ourselves. Like, there are people who study for years and years on like what the body needs. So we can go to people for support with this.
Yeah.
But that, of course, but the reality is we live in a world where a lot of the food that's easy to get is highly processed, and it's not that good for us. So if we want to get healthier and eat better, we've got to think about it, and we need to kind of have a bit of a strategy involved and talk to the right people, maybe join get a supplementation company or something, have something that you can rely on and support you. And then the other thing that I would just say around food is that, for me, one thing that I realized quite early on is that our gut is to have good gut health is so important, because if our gut isn't functioning well, that's where a lot of the bacteria, viruses, all these things, if you've got a kind of leaky gut or there's damage in the gut, that's how these things get into your bloodstream a lot easier, and that's how we can get ill a lot easier. It's like, if we have a strong and healthy gut, it's built to pass through it's built to pass the toxins through the body, and helps digest the food. I mean, that's a really massive subject, but maybe and obviously, we can't go into detail with everything, but I would really recommend, if people are wanting to up level the food side of things, look into gut health, because it's integral.
I was diagnosed in my 50s. So through the years, over the past years, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, leaky gut. They put me on the diets, were restrictive diets. I experimented with lots of supplements. When I moved here to Austin, I found a really good natural acupuncturist, and she studies other Chinese medicine. And she had a really great supplemental line that I started using. And I literally probably, switched mostly all to that, just because it's whole food. And my body, like you said, a lot of things are processed, and our bodies just are there GNO, genetically, and GMO, and just things that I don't really want to put in my body if I don't have to, when there's other options. But supplements are huge. I mean, and the whole thing with the gut, I feel like that could be a whole nother episode. I would love us to come back and dive into the nutrition part of this, and the gut health, and the supplements, and some other tricks and tools to help people if they're struggling with their overall health, because that was definitely going on when I was also seeing that doctor. I was having extremely gut health issues that caused me to end up in the emergency room. And this was only a few years ago. And so, look, I knew then I had to make some serious decisions about my life and my nutrition. And the beautiful thing is that no matter where we are now, we have access to it at our fingertips, thanks to the internet, thanks to people like us who have programs online to help people with whatever they're dealing with in their life. There's so many wonderful programs and people out online that are helping other people through any challenges. So I really would love to hear how you decided to take this time of your life and then become healthy, figure out what you needed, and then now to offer it to other women. Can you share how you started helping other women after you found healing? Yeah,
I'd love to. So it's been, I think one of my, I love it. I love this work. And for me, kind of getting to the point where after a certain amount of time, just suddenly this framework was really appearing in my mind around, because I think health, I've always been a holistic thinker. I mean, I study holistic science and transformative learning, and that was my work. But health is really no different. There's so much going on. It's not just one thing, and that doesn't mean that it has to be really difficult. But it's not just one thing. And every health issue you have is physical, emotional, mental. It's all those three things to varying degrees. But we've separated all those things off. We, even within the doctor surgery, we then separate different parts of the body, and like everything's separated. What I've loved so much about what I offer is that I feel I'm bringing it all back together again, and I'm saying like this, in giving a kind of holistic offering, really, so that we can start looking at the root causes for our illness and start dealing with the underneath, all the stuff that's happening, reinvent ourselves, the belief systems, the health, the nutrition, emotions, how to let them flow, and how to use those, see them as part of our guidance system. So much like create daily routines, visioning, visualization, and using all of these things so that we can create true health, rather than the kind of current model, which is dealing with the consequences and dealing with the symptoms, really, like medicating symptoms. I'm interested in like, how can we create health daily?
And to get to the root of it, right? I mean, when you have something happen, and you will naturally want to just calm down the symptoms. Like, how can we cope?
Yeah.
But that's just putting a Band-Aid on it, and it's just masking instead of really asking and trying to figure out what is really going on. You know, I mean, I could go to so many doctors, and I was in debt for medical bills, and I had no answers. Literally, I walked away with, you have too much stress in your life. And here's the bills. So, which was more stress, right? So that just compounded the stress. But I could choose to allow myself to remain that victim, or I could choose to make a decision and do something about it and step out of that victim box and say, I'm going to take control over my own health. I'm going to take control over my own life. And this is what I'm going to do. And so, as you said, you reached out and you hired a coach, and I did as well, to help us get through those times where we feel stuck. Because I think too, and a lot of the work I do is with women who had emotions that are stuck in their body. And so, they've never dealt with their abortion. And so they just stuff it down. And maybe every time they think about it, they might eat. And so then they're overweight, and then they're depressed, and those will cause more problems. So it's like getting to the root of the issue. Because for me in my work, these women sometimes have had their abortion 10, 20 years ago. So they don't even really, they consciously don't realize the connection between their hurt and their pain and their suffering, and then their actual physical symptoms, from their body, when the root of it could be the anger. It could be the self-hatred. So, I love what you said. I definitely believe that, we're one person, but we're a lot of different areas, because we have our mind, our body, and our spirit, is how I feel. And I know you put it like, I love how you have the head, heart, and the hands. And I just would like you to explain, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to the women that come into your group? What does that mean, the head and the heart and the hands? Like, how do you explain that to them?
Thank you. I love that question. And I just feel I want to say one thing about before we move into that, is that I'm not against medical interventions at all. Because I think we need to see those as a really useful bridge. It's just when that we start to see them as like a destination, that's the problem for me. So I just felt I needed to say that for my own, because I think sometimes there's nothing wrong with using these things as a pathway to health, but we must always just see them as a bridge to health, rather than like I stuck with a certain scenario.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And what I also want to add, thank you for clarifying that. And I also want to add that I see sometimes, even what I experience is like, you may get to the point where there is nothing, like they can't find any other reason, right? Like, just like that doctor who said to me, after I spent so much money getting the injections to stop the pain, he's like, I think this is stress. You need to get rid of the stress in your life before you'll get better. And he was a wise doctor to tell me that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate he was a determining factor in my life that caused me to have that shift, because I realized he's right. I need to listen to this doctor. So yes, they will be used on our path to journey, on our journey to healing. So I love that you said that. But, what we offer is just a little more supplemental, and they might help with the physical part. I feel like my work helps with like the emotional part of it so much. And is that how your work is as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like I think it's the kind of path you can go down to really transform your health fully. But we have to just accept there's going to be lots of different things that we need to do to get there, I think. And I love your last question. I would really like to answer that, actually. Okay. Which was the head, heart and hands. And
yes.
So this is a terminology that I worked for a number of years at a transformational centre. I was the education manager there. And part of the methodology was about a transformation was that we do the theory, and so I've taken this on as part of my program because I just feel it's so powerful. And the head is like, we go into the theory and we learn something new, and then, which could be, for example, the emotions are part of our guidance system. Okay, great. So you learn the theory of that, but we then want to move into the body and we want to experience that, because regardless of what I say, what anyone else will say, you want to make your own mind up, right? You need to experience it and know that it's going to work for you. So I use all sorts of different processes, from meditation, visualization, movement, tapping, breath work. There's different things that I use just so that nature connection, different stuff, so that it moves into the body and then we experience it. And then from the experiencing, we move into action. So that's the hands. That's so it's moving from the mind into the body and then out into action.
Okay, so are you saying that it starts with our beliefs and our stories and the things that we think about ourselves and our body?
I think that's a really good place to start changing that. And we can use the theory and the science, and because I'm a scientist at heart, I'm very logical as well as into the kind of holistic side of things. And so yes, we want to learn something new about ourselves. Could it be true that our bodies are self-healing and self-regulating? Okay, I'm telling you that, but how do we then experience that on a cellular level? Is that true? To
feel it.
Yeah, and then to feel that. Yeah.
Okay.
And experience it.
And that's through movement, whether it's to go take a walk or to do yoga or to do a workout at the gym, any type of movement you feel, any energy movement.
I use lots of different processes, but some of them are guided. They're guided processes. So it would literally take you. Let me think. If with the emotion side of things, that would be. That's experimentation. So that's a process around experimenting with it. When you're angry, is that just random, or is that because somebody's crossed a boundary? It's like a protective mechanism. It's a direct, or is it something that's coming up from a past trauma? There's lots of different ways that I use to kind of experience it, but a lot of them are guided processes. Yeah.
And then the action part, that's where the hands come in to literally take action, right? And start doing the things that they learn or hear about, implement them into their life to actually see the changes in their life, in their body. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So I say quite often, but we are what we repeatedly do. It's we can learn all of the stuff and have all these amazing experiences, and that's great. Yeah. But unless we change what we're doing day to day, nothing's really going to change. It's and also we have to remember that those changes only have to be they can be tiny little changes. They don't have to be huge, massive change. Yeah. It's just these little 1-2 degree changes in what we do day to day. Be amazed what that does. So the action for me is really about that. It's about recognizing that we are what we repeatedly do. And if we want to be different, we need to do things differently. And that doesn't mean that we need to quit our job, change our relationship. It might mean that, but it doesn't have to be that dramatic. It can be, I'm actually just going to get up at half an hour earlier and I'm going to go and, I don't know, do something relaxing and have some herbal tea rather than coffee. I don't know what it is, but it could be a very small little change. But what you'll find is those little tiny little changes, if you keep making them, 2 months down the line, you look at your life and you're like, wow, I'm different. Like, I'm experiencing reality differently.
Thank you so much for listening to Life is a Treasure podcast. As we begin to share our secret stories, others find the courage to start sharing theirs. And this is how the healing begins. So please help us by subscribing, reviewing, and sharing this podcast. And make sure to tag me on Instagram at Michelle Marie with 2 E's, Durand, Durand, with hashtag Life is a Treasure podcast for a chance to get a shout out on the show. Also visit lifeisatreasure.com for all resources mentioned and freebies. And don't forget, come join us and continue the conversations in our free Facebook group, Life is a Treasure podcast. The link will be in the show notes. You can also find my social media links on the website, lifeisatreasure.com. Again, thank you so much for listening. Until next week, peace, love, and joy.